We're live, streaming from Austin, Texas.
And Rockville, Maryland.
In the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Andrei and Charlie. What's up, dude?
What's up, man? Just hanging out. Been thinking about Star Wars a little bit with all these new shows and movies that, the guys at Disney got planned. It looks like there's not going to be any shortage for quite a long time, and that kind of made me think, I wanted to look back further into, the history of Star Wars, the backstory, because if you think about it,
some cool stuff.
It's, they live in a highly technological world, but it kind of makes you wonder, how did that all come about, and how does that mirror our own history and development, and what changed? Where did the Republic come from? Where did the Force come from? The Jedi, all these things. And I was kind of looking around on this site, Wikipedia, which is obviously a pun on Wikipedia for all things Star Wars.
The Wookiees from planet Kashyyyk, right, or something?
Exactly, yeah. Most famous being our boy Chewie, as we all know.
Our old boy Chewie, yeah. No, man, it's crazy. Where did, a lot of the times in Star Wars, they don't exactly explain, where this stuff came from. Even until, episode 1, we didn't even know where the Metachlorians came from, so it's where does hyperspace come from?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to some extent, this was not necessarily planned out by Lucas when he originally conceived of these, as movies, but throughout, the 80s and 90s, there were a bunch of different books written by authors that kind of fit into the greater Star Wars universe and were approved by Lucas as being canon. And then to add to that, you had games and other things like that all kind of built this huge, fleshed out world and universe and backstory.
And then, some of it is and some of it is not canon, right?
Right, because when Disney took over in 2015 or so, they wiped out a lot of that and made their own canon. They kept some bits and pieces and kind of assimilated it into the rest of theirs, but there's a lot of controversy about that. We don't really want to get into that whole debate now, but we can look at, for example,
I don't really have a dog in this fight, but yeah, I understand there's a lot of controversy into this whole thing.
Yeah, so for example...
So whether it's controversial or not, what's going on with hyperspace? So there's space whales?
Yeah.
This isn't an exaggeration, right?
Apparently it's not a joke. I'm not sure if that was originally the idea or if that's something that was later added by Disney, but these things called Purrgil, which are basically giant space whales, traveled the galaxy through hyperspeed. They created these sort of tunnels, and they became known as hyperspace lanes. And because of that kind of enabled other species in the galaxy to use those lanes to, traverse and reach very distant planets and systems that they would not otherwise have been able to. I guess that's kind of what helped made the Galactic Republic.
And does Wikipedia kind of gives the dates for when this stuff supposedly happened or were discovered within the context of the Star Wars universe, right?
Yeah, they do actually. It's funny. They include the Big Bang as the start of everything, and they talk about various species evolving in the early times, the Wookiees, the predecessors to the humans. So there is science to it. It's not simply space magic like some people think. But yeah, this happened thousands and thousands of years before the era of Luke Skywalker and everybody and the characters everybody knows. From what I recall,
thousands and thousands, almost 100,000 years beforehand, or 50,000.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like that. The dates change depending on what timeline you look at, but from what I recall, one of the earliest significant events was the Rakata, which were these advanced race of aliens established something called the Infinite Empire about 35,000 BBY, which is a notation that means before Battle of Yavin.
And Battle of Yavin's episode Which episode is that again?
Well, episode 4 now, but it was originally 1. It was the OG Star Wars, you know, like the first.
OG Star Wars, you know.
A New Hope.
Some say the best Star Wars, right?
Well, I think Empire Strikes Back might take that one, but that's up for debate.
But I guess it's up for debate, is what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people have strong feelings about what their favorite Star Wars is.
Of course. And so some might even like the prequel trilogy more. You know, I fall into that camp sometimes. But
I mean, we're interesting because we kind of grew up with the prequels, so we were kids, and there was a lot of marketing that was targeted to us because we were more or less Anakin's age in episode 1.
oh yeah,
Right? We're kind of around like 10 years older, a little older, younger, somewhere around there.
I mean, come on, pod racing. How can you not like that as a kid?
I mean, it's like the chariot race in Ben-Hur, right?
I guess it. You know, like a lot of things in the original, in the prequel trilogy did have parallels to ancient Rome. I mean, yeah, the chariot races being one, the galactic, the Senate. You know, the way that changed and gave rise to the Empire internally through internal politics and machinations. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Abuse of
And I mean,
dictatorial
they had
power.
an incredible ensemble of actors, right? They had Keira Knightley, they had Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor. I mean,
Oh yeah.
just incredible. Just to
Star-studded
name like the
cast,
top
yeah.
few.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, they get some flack for Jar Jar and the way, you know, Anakin acted, but, you know, overall, I think they were solid, especially when compared to the more recent films, but let's not get into that right now.
But, I mean, like we said, you know, if anybody's listening and they have strong feelings about this, we acknowledge, like, you could have opinions that you like certain aspects of more than we do, right?
Of course, and, you know, we here respect other people's opinions. They're able to articulate them, explain why.
I mean, in all aspects, yeah, Star Wars, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back to what
so
we're...
let's get back. We
Yeah.
kind of got a little off track. The space whales.
Yeah,
Can you
so
tell us
yeah,
more
the
about
space
that?
whales they carved these hyperlanes, and then the Rakata, these strange-looking aliens, carved out this gigantic empire. But after a while, they fell. That had a rather violent and swift end. And I think this is actually hinted at in the very popular game Knights of the Old Republic. You kind of get some hints about like very ancient history about the beginning.
This is like pre-Republic, right? This
Yeah,
is
this like
pre-Republic.
the Rakata Infinite Empire. Yeah, they're pre-Republic, and they use like some kind of special forge to create like an infinite amount of vessels that could, you know, enable them to conquer the world. And I don't remember a lot of the details, to be honest, at this point. Then eventually,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that
yeah,
they couldn't have the Old Republic without hyperspace reality, right? Or
Right.
hyperspace travel.
yeah, just like, you know, we couldn't have a global, you know, world that we do today without, you know, our transportation, that, you know, and infrastructure that we have today.
Hadn't reached the Americas, basically. I mean, depending on if you look at it from Vikings, but basically, they didn't have regular sustained contact with the Americas without like certain technological advances and
Right.
navigation that were sort of around at the end of the 15th
Yeah.
century.
And of course, like the first like truly global empires, including like the British Empire, you know, they depended on the modern world essentially, the early modern world.
Like telegraphs, steam engines,
Mhm.
that type of stuff.
Mhm.
And so equivalently, that they had hyperspace reality to travel to like the edges of the galaxy, right? And basically, there's only one galaxy.
Essentially, yeah. There's one galaxy. There's one galaxy where everything happens. There are supposedly extra galactic beings like the Yuuzhan Vong that, you know, way later invade. But
I mean, if we're just being a little pedantic, the beginning of every Star Wars movie says a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So that is to say, it's almost as if they're talking. Whoever's recording the Star Wars story is almost as if they're not even in that galaxy, right? They're in a separate
Yeah,
galaxy. Distant.
yeah, if you put it that way, you're right. Yeah. And the timeline does say that the universe is created by the Big Bang, which obviously there are billions of galaxies out there in reality. So,
I mean, even in our reality, so to speak,
that's what I'm saying.
We live we're a solar system, we're a planet in a solar system of many solar systems rotating around a galactic core within a cluster of, I believe, billions of galaxies, right?
Yeah.
Within like this other bubble of like that's not even our cluster of lots of space in between of other clusters of billions of galaxies. So
each with like millions of stars. Yeah, it's incredible, honestly. And I think they're trying to essentially set Star Wars in the same universe as us. That's what makes it appealing. Like, I think the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away was like a literary kind of mechanism that Lucas used to put a lot of distance between us and that, but also to make it as if, to make it seem like it's still within the same universe, the same plane of existence. It's just so far that, a lot of things are very different.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
But,
it's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can be said about like whether Star Wars is meant to be taken more as a proper sci-fi or more as like a fantasy space opera, which in some ways I think it is more, because it doesn't focus so much on the science
How would
as...
you distinguish the two?
Well, I think like sci-fi, a good example of like proper sci-fi is like Star Trek and things like that, because that actually focuses on the scientific aspects, like the technology and like how that affects,
But there is some scientific aspect in Star Wars with like midichlorians, right?
Right, but that was kind of almost like retroact. That was added, in the second series of movies.
Well, so does it cease to become a space opera at that point?
I don't know if that's enough to... The focus still really isn't on that. It straddles a line between the two genres, I think, but I'd put it more as a space opera. It's about drama. It's about
operas that you would cite to. It's like similarly situated.
Yeah, I do think, since like the focus is on like the characters and the Force, which is almost like a form of magic, and the politics and things like that, it's more about the drama and the...
Right, the drama is really beautiful. It's wonderfully well done. I mean, they say that it follows sort of archetypal stories of storytelling, right?
The hero's journey, essentially, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason people find it very relatable and inspiring the world over, why it became as successful as it did.
Yeah, I had seen a podcast, or I guess not a podcast, like it was a documentary with Joseph Campbell in the late 1980s, around 1988, with a famous interviewer who, I think it was on PBS or something, or it was something along those lines. It was a nice little documentary. It was talking about how Lucas really sort of incorporated these theories of the mythical archetype in his storytelling, and like the trials and the travails, the mentor, the function that Obi-Wan has in the story, the function that Han Solo has in the story, the function that Darth Vader has, and it's really fascinating that George Lucas might have, I guess, admitted to sort of incorporating the storytelling within the context of that space opera.
Oh, for sure.
There's this huge history behind it. It's not just the hero's journey, right? We got space whales. We have like the creation of the universe. We have, midichlorians.
Oh yeah, it goes, and I think
encyclopedic story.
Yeah, that's what makes it appealing, because it's. I mean, on some scale, it is a story about the characters and about family and friendship and fighting for a good cause. But behind it, there's like this huge backstory where there were tons of other equally heroic events and wars and
going on thousands of years, right? I mean, it's not just like, and that's why it spans novels, games, movies. Wasn't there a Christmas special in like 1980 or 1970?
Yeah, we don't talk about that though,
Yeah, but I mean, it is considered canon, right? And there are details that were
I bet they wish it wasn't, though. I think the Christmas special was interestingly the first bit of footage that introduced Boba Fett, which is a very popular character.
Well, my understanding is that there was a cutout scene from the New Hope that introduced Boba Fett. Like, he bumps into Han Solo on Tatooine.
Maybe.
And they took that out.
It's possible. I can't say for certain.
But obviously they took it out, so it's not canon. But, I mean, that is pretty cool, yeah.
It is cool, and the fact is, like, any author with a good imagination and some knowledge of how their story kind of fits in with the rest of the Star Wars universe can create, these new stages of epic space dramas set within somewhere in this universe in some time, like thousands of years kind of before, and it all kind of fits together in this, like, grand, kind of narrative that spans the entire history of the galaxy, which is pretty fascinating, I think.
Yeah.
And
it's cool stuff. I mean, it's this archetypal story. It's detailed encyclopedic storytelling. It really kind of spans the gamut of what people might find interesting.
Right, because there are people who look. There are some people who are more interested in just the drama and the characters, and then there's other people who enjoy the lore. There are a lot of lore geeks out there because there's so much backstory, and they kind of want to know how it all fits together, and that's just a different way to come at it, but it's still very interesting. But back to where we're going, yeah. So from reading here, the first hyperdrive was the hyperspace tractor beam used by these people called the Celestials. They were like these almost godlike kind of, non-mortal beings, like a million years ago. And then various other kind of species developed them. The Infinite Empire had their own, but theirs was like built around apparently the dark side of the Force to travel through hyperspace. And their empire fell because they were kind of oppressive to a lot of their subject peoples, but they don't really give a lot of info on that. It says here like the first human ships to explore the stars were sleeper ships. They're basically these kind of generational ships that like traveled for decades or centuries. That was before the arrival of like the hyperspace cannons and the lanes that enabled them to really get out there.
So do they always travel in lanes?
Like I said, before then they didn't, and I guess that would probably be kind of like how if we ever make it off this planet, we'll be sending out generational spaceships to people that have to like kind of grow up on these ships and until they find a world like thousands of light years away.
Yeah, and they're traveling to all different parts of the galaxy. Like we can barely travel to different parts of our solar system, right?
Oh yeah, it's completely different level that we're talking about here, but
and it's interesting. Like some planets are more like Tatooine is somewhat of an unknown planet, I guess you'd say.
The Outer Rim, yeah. There are definitely parts of the galaxy that were not as well mapped and known or populated as like other like the core. Yeah, there's like the core worlds, and there's different kind of sectors of the galaxy. The Republic, I believe, like it grew up around the core worlds. I think Coruscant was their main planet, and it was like.
What was the core planet, Coruscant?
Yeah, and what did it say? It was like 100,000 years ago that the first kind of buildings started there, and eventually that came.
That was pre hyperdrive. Right?
I think so, yeah. But what's fascinating is that kind of city came to take over the entire planet, to where the whole planet was covered in one massive like urban, sprawl.
I wonder what it was like for these alien cultures to first interact with each other. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, some of them were more peaceful, some of them were not. There was like the Duros. They had their own independent kind of workarounds for the hyperdrive, apparently, according to this article.
But there are humans in this, so it's not like necessarily Earth, but there are humans.
Yeah, we don't really have Earth in there.
Simultaneously at different planets, or do they evolve independently?
That's Not exactly sure. I think there's a great degree of independent evolution. I think the closest thing that we have to Earth in that galaxy is Alderaan, actually, which was in
that's like the original Earth people?
It's probably the closest thing we have to that, but apparently, like, the early humans...
Alderaan is destroyed in episode
of course.
New Hope, right?
Spoiler alert, Charlie.
Oh, well, fair enough. I mean...
I kid. But, according to this, like, the early humans were known as the Zell originally, or there were some other people that were similar to humans.
Did the humans evolve in this?
Yeah, and, like, they... Originally, their world, they had to share it with a different race of aliens called the Tong, and they had some conflicts with them early on, kind of before they were able to expand further out in the galaxy. I guess that makes sense. Like, a lot of great powers, you know, they have, like, some epic kind of conflict or war early on, like Rome with Carthage, until it could really stand on its own and have the confidence.
The Etruscans, too.
And the Etruscans, yeah, there's a lot of different, you know.
Yeah. And this is, like, pre-Roman Republic.
Yep.
So, well, I guess then going back to that analogy of Rome, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the pre-Republic had a lot of issues, like the pre-Roman Republic, which I guess you'd call the Roman monarchy, right?
Yep, when they threw off the yoke of Etruscan tyranny and decided to implement a republic. Speaking of the Republic, yeah, I believe the Republic was founded around 25,000 before the Battle of Yavin, and yeah, at this point the hyperspace lane's already kind of, you know, in place, and they incorporated a bunch of worlds in the core sector that all kind of decided to pursue a common united cause.
There's a lot of people who live a long time in Star Wars, such as Yoda, but no one was alive.
Oh, no.
Of the Republic that was alive at the Battle of Yavin.
Yoda, I mean, his species might live like he was like around 900 something years old. It's pretty old for his species, but yeah, this is thousands of years.
Yeah.
But let me see if I can look up a little bit about the early Republic.
Yeah, I would like to know how it transitioned into a republic. That would be very curious to me. Or I would be very curious to find that out. I would be very interested.
Yeah, the Galactic Republic was founded with the signing of the Galactic Constitution, and Coruscant became the new government's capital. Then, like, a bunch of different trade routes were founded that linked Coruscant with other clusters. The Corellian Run was mapped.
What's the Corellian Run?
It's some kind of special it's one of the largest hyperspace routes that runs through the galaxy. Apparently, from Corellia to I don't know, some other region in the core worlds. Let's see. I think it was around this time as well that the Jedi Order emerged as a Force-sensitive peoples were finding ways to kind of...
Where did the Jedi originate?
Good question. I believe the temple was on Ossus. That was the original Jedi temple.
And then it's not necessarily that they were like a specific race, but rather the Jedi are all encompassing, right? It's just anyone who has a certain level of midichlorians, as it's later described in, right?
Right, yeah. And at first I'm not even sure if they really knew or conceived of midichlorians. It was just, you know, that they could tell who was Force sensitive and who could kind of manipulate the Force around them. And let me see, the Jedi Order, ancient peacekeeping organization. So yeah, at heart they were peacekeepers. Apparently, the Order was founded, like the true origin of the Order was on the lush planet of Tython, which I kind of remember from like the game I played in the Deep Core. This is actually before the Republic even. This is like 36,000 BBY. Let's see. For millennia, the Jed... So this is like a a predecessor order to the Jedi. It's spelled Jei''Dai', so Jedi. They flourished
So the
on.
language shifted a little bit.
Yeah. They flourished on like Tython, erected great temples and monuments to the Force, and remained ever vigilant to the lures of both the light and the dark. Then a conflict arose between the followers of Ashla, who sought knowledge, and the followers of Bogan, who wanted to gain power. Known as the Force Wars, the conflict took a terrible toll on the planet, sending Tython out of balance and destroying the ecosystem. In the end, the followers of Bogan were defeated. And these followers of Bogan were the ones who were kind of more dark side, in a way. Although the idea of dark side and light side were not quite as, I think, defined at the time. And then, let's see. They talk about like the beginning of lightsabers, how they were able to freeze like laser beams which would cut through, steel and whatnot. I think the early sabers.
Basically, lightsabers can cut through anything.
Yeah.
Except another lightsaber.
Yeah, exactly. What's interesting is the early sabers were these things called proto-sabers, which have like sort of these like battery packs attached to your waist, and then like these long cables that actually attach to the hilt of the sword, which is a lot more unwieldy. Over time, they kind of refined them to what they are, in the current era. And then like the Rakata, those alien kind of race that I talked about, had a thing called the Force Saber, which is a precursor to the lightsaber as well.
Yeah.
But eventually, I think at some point they decided to join the Galactic Republic and serve it as sort of like a peacekeeping force, the Jedi.
Yeah, so that makes sense that they would go kind of that peacekeeping route, because that's the route they're basically playing in Episode 1.
Oh yeah, and I guess that kind of maintained all those thousands of years.
Yeah.
What is interesting though is, anytime you get like Sith, they often started as some kind of Jedi originally. Like, they're often Jedis that went bad. And as a matter of fact, there around 7000 BBY, there was like what's called the Second Great Schism of Jedi. That resulted in a time called the 100-Year Darkness, because a group of heretical dark Jedi that experimented with like forbidden alchemy apparently splintered off and began to fight the rest, and it was like this pretty cataclysmic war. And then eventually the remnants of those dark Jedi, they landed on like the planet Korriban, where they encountered this race of red-skinned beings called the Sith. The Sith.
How do you spell it? Korriban?
Korriban. That was the Sith like sort of headquarters.
Also known as Moraband.
I didn't know that.
Or maybe not. It's Korriban, known as Pesigam.
Basically like the Sith homeworld, but the Sith, as I said, were originally like a separate race of like red-skinned people who were somewhat force sensitive, and then they encountered these dark Jedi, and out of them grew like the first actual Sith, apparently.
The Valley of the Dark Lords.
Yeah.
Interesting. But could they travel in hyperspace reality?
I think, well, at the time, I'm not sure if they did. They were actually, like, the original Sith were pretty primitive people, like, almost like tribalistic.
Evidently they show up in a video game, Battle of Korriban, Galactic Civil War, Star Wars Battlefront, Renegade Squadron.
Yeah, and then like the Sith like race that kind of dwindled over time, but they still kind of contributed to the Sith Order a lot, even millennia later apparently. So yeah, they would show up in games. Apparently,
yeah, that movie came out that video game came out in 2007, and I guess it makes sense based on the graphics I'm looking at.
What game was that?
It was Star Wars Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron came out in 2007.
Battlefront.
2007.
That's a
It was
classic.
the third installment of the Star Wars Battlefront series.
Cool.
I think I played the Battlefront series, the initial one, back in the day.
Yeah, those are really popular games.
Yeah, they're pretty fun.
Strategy.
But, interesting.
Let's see, what else we got? Just, scrolling through the timeline here. Let's see. So, yeah, the early Republic kind of went through some rocky phases early on as it, like, grew and consolidated its power. Looks like there were, like, a bunch of, like, civil wars and conflicts between Coruscant and this place called Alsaken. A lot of times throughout the early Republic, every few thousand years. And there was a time where it looks like the Hutts, who we know from like Jabba the Hutt, were like dominant throughout a sector of space and were like a major power, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. Oh, and then there's this thing called the Pius Dea Crusade and like era where like these fanatical humans took over the government of the Republic, and they were essentially hostile toward all alien races. They were sort of a human-centric purists. It took them quite a while and a few wars to kind of get them out of power, but I guess that kind of like mirrors our own experience with like, you know, certain racial supremacists and stuff in our own world, in our own country. So it's an interesting era for sure. Like, from what I see, there's the Great Hyperspace War, 5000 BBY. And,
what was the Great Hyperspace War about?
let's see.
It was a conflict between the Galactic Republic and the
Sith Empire
that was featured in the legendary Queldorma epic Droma epics, taking place in approximately 5000 BBY according to the epics. Great Sith Wars began around the same time according to the myths. Great Hyperspace War was initiated when the Sith Empire invaded the planet Empress Teta.
Yep.
So there's a difference between canon and legends here.
Yeah.
And this seems to be canon, what I'm reading here. Oh, you can actually get different entries for Empress Teta based on canon and legends.
Oh yeah, like most of the articles have that.
Okay. So the story sort of diverges on its own, and there's like different. There's canon, and then there's, yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Well, I mean, that's good to know about, just in general, kind of delving into these topics. How are we doing on time?
Looks like we're about 32 minutes in.
Well, I mean, should we think about wrapping this up?
We can take a quicker tour of the rest of galactic history then. There was also a great droid revolution around 4000 BBY, in which droids like across the Republic rebelled against their biological masters, like the humans and other aliens, because apparently they were like treated unfairly and stuff, and it didn't really end well for them in the end though. The droids were eventually defeated, and then I think the droid makers they turned to weapons makers to develop these ion weapons that would short circuit the droids' electronic systems to kind of keep them in check. So that put an end to the so-called droids' rights movement for a while. And just an interesting little episode because it kind of parallels some of our own like rights movements on Earth and like the ethical issues that we're sort of contending with today and will probably have to in the future eventually, as you know, AI becomes a bigger thing. I guess another like noteworthy time was like around like 39, 100 before the Battle of Aladdin. That's when the main like Sith wars took place. That was like the era of Knights of the Old Republic with like Darth Revan and Malak and all those like characters from the games.
Are these characters mentioned in the movies?
Well, that's the thing. Like they're
predecessors to like Darth Plagueis. I actually read that book, Darth Plagueis. I don't know if it was canon or legends, but it was a really good book and how he initially interacted with Emperor Palpatine when he was young, and sort of Emperor Palpatine's interest in power. But had the rule of two existed by that point that you're talking about?
Not quite. No, this was a
pre-rule.
lot of these, as I said originally, kind of Jedi who became Sith, and in Revan's case, he came to the light side again, and then apparently there was like this evil Sith Emperor who was really pulling the strings for like hundreds of years because he lived a very long time, was almost immortal. His name was Vitiate. He was kind of like the engineer behind this entire massive war, and was able to kind of manipulate all these people into his grand plan, kind of in a way that Palpatine would do thousands of years later. And that's like in the game, like the Old Republic, which is like an MMO, you know. It's still kind of ongoing now, actually.
Really? The MMO is still going?
Yeah, not the original MMO, which was Star Wars Galaxies, and which a lot of people found more fun, but the more recent one from like 2011.
Understood.
But then, yeah, the rule of two, I think, was set up under Darth Bane when like the Sith were kind of dwindling. This is after like the Mandalorian Wars and a bunch of other.
Why were they dwindling so much?
A lot of stuff happened. Like I remember the Mandalorians caused like a big hullabaloo in the galaxy at one point on their crusade, and they were contained, and then then there were more wars between the Sith and Republic, but there was kind of a crackdown on it. And at this point, the Republic was becoming stronger and stronger and more stable. I don't remember the details. I mean, there were kind of entire books about that time, but
yeah,
Darth Bane, like, yeah, he decided to keep only one apprentice, at a time, and the idea was that, I'm not sure if he intended it or not, but like his apprentice killed him, and then the same would happen with his apprentice that he took in turn, and then that became almost a custom over time, and then over 1,000 years that led.
Why would you become a Sith if your apprentice is going to kill you?
I guess they had a greater purpose in mind. First, they probably thought that they were too strong for their apprentice to be able to do that. But and if they did, then they really deserved it. Like they earned it. And I guess that was the idea.
That seems unhealthy and not like productive.
I mean, they're the bad guy for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy that type of stuff would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think in certain cases the apprentice tried to kill the master and failed, and instead the master killed them. Like, that was entirely possible if the apprentice was too weak when they tried to do that. It's not like the master would just, like, roll over at will.
If you're a master and apprentice, it can have certain levels of trust, such as, like, sleeping next to squares and such. I mean, you could almost do it while there's...
I'm not sure it worked that way between them.
I mean, you could say it's not as honorable, but they're like, who cares about honor,
I
right?
actually couldn't hear a bit of what you said earlier.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was saying, like, they have, like, a certain level of trust where, like, they would sleep next to each other. Like, if they're sleeping in close quarters.
I'm not sure. I don't mean trust. There's different levels of trust. And I think that part of the Sith trust is predicated on, like, fear and respect and desire to learn. Like, the apprentice, they got something out of it by learning, the ways of the dark side from the master. And the master was able to pass on the lessons, but also kind of refine and cultivate his own abilities. And yeah, obviously they worked together to undermine the Empire, though a lot of the time they kind of remained dormant for a lot of their history until like the era of like Palpatine, when he kind of took things down from within, so to speak. Do you recall if in the book with Darth Plagueis he knew that Palpatine was going to kill him?
I don't think he did. I think it was more of a surprise. But
that's interesting, seeing as their entire line for the last 1,000 years have had that like dynamic and tradition, so to speak. He just didn't see it coming, like.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah. One scene that really sticks out to me in Darth Plagueis isn't really related to what we're talking about, but it's he sees Anakin, and you can almost tell like he's trying to test Anakin even in the first time that he meets Anakin, the person who would eventually become Emperor Palpatine.
Really?
Another interesting note about that is Emperor Palpatine was descended. They had a monarchy in Naboo, but it was like an elected monarchy, and he was descended from another king who had been voted out, and that's why he had some animosity against Padme and her cohort, because he kind of wanted to have that role. So he was kind of like studying in Naboo, and he was a student in Naboo. So it's just kind of some interesting backstory. I was hoping more when I read that. I think it was Jane Lucento that read it. It was like around when COVID pandemic started, like 2020, early 2020. Kind of crazy stuff, but when I read that, so it's been because now it's like May 2023, but
yeah, time flies, man. But
yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that Palpatine. Yeah, I knew he was some kind of like Naboo nobility, but I didn't realize he was like a rival family of.
Well, not necessarily rival. They just have like like an monarchy. Like we don't even have that in the real world. Like I mean, there's no such thing as it's not even a constitutional monarchy.
Yeah, I guess. Well, his ambitions proved to be much larger than just Naboo.
More, but it seemed like at first he wasn't necessarily on this path. But yeah, he didn't. He was kind of he was a bad boy.
But he had problems with his own father. He resented his father, and that, and didn't kind of measure up to what was expected of him, or. From what I recall, that was part of it.
Yeah.
A lot of these people don't start out completely evil. I mean, that goes to the whole idea of like, can anybody be born evil, or are they made? And there's always some event that kind of triggers it, or a series of events.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I mean, should we? Do you want to wrap it up? Say a few more things about the calendar.
Yeah, I mean so that kind of brings us gradually to the era, the end of the Old Republic, which is showcased in the prequel trilogy. As we all know, like the Clone Wars were essentially a civil war that was secretly orchestrated by Senator Palpatine to enable his own like takeover.
And granted, that's seen in the movies as well.
Yep, exactly. And then eventually, the Empire held reign for about 25 years or so, and then the New Republic came about. And then obviously later, Disney changed things. I think the original extended universe was more interesting with the multiple children of Han Solo, some of which went bad, and I believe Luke also had and there's like this thing called the Yuuzhan Vong War, where these beings from outside the galaxy invaded and basically killed like trillions of people, and it was like this,
That's crazy. Yeah.
insane catastrophe that the entire galaxy had to kind of unite to fight, including like the remnants of the Empire. And they had like they were unable to be sensed through the Force by the Jedi, so that gave them a lot of problems. But eventually, they beat them. So that pretty much kind of covers a broad overview of galactic history. So there's a lot. I mean, obviously, there's much more to it that you could talk about for days, but we don't have that kind of time. This is just a brief kind of look through Wikipedia. Yeah, I mean, if you want to pick a specific like time period or a specific thread or current of Star Wars or its history that you want to kind of look at, that'd be interesting.
I would love that.
We could also look about like the real life history of how the movies were conceived and how like they kind of grew and expanded from the original idea to what they are now. That could also be interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, man. I think it's just really cool discussing all these things. Just something that I kind of had like trying to make a pun, a hyperspace, quick like learning about hyperspace. You know what I mean? I had a hyperspace interaction just with Wikipedia trying to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool stuff. I mean, like you said, it's a Jungian archetypal journey, but it's also just a fun encyclopedic journey, and it has a lot of details. And I mean, we could spend like hours just talking about like one sentence that we talked about on this recording. Exactly.
I mean, there's so much content out there. I mean, it's like it rivals that of like Tolkien in a way, but the difference is this was made by like many different people as opposed to one person.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's true. But the Tolkien story seems like it will continue to expand as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that would be another interesting topic to discuss on a potential future episode.
I would love that. Yeah, absolutely.
So much depth to that. All right, ladies and germs, till next time. May the Force be with you.